Welcome, everybody, to a very special episode of App Stories brought to you this week by Notion. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Stephen Hackett, my very special guest. How you doing, Stephen?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I mean, we're recording live in our Club Mac Stories Discord because a little while ago, Apple held a very unusual, nearly Halloween event on October 30th at 8 p.m. Eastern, which is different. I don't know that they've ever done an evening event that I can think of. I mean,
no, I don't think so.
No, I mean, I think it's always 10 a.m. Pacific usually. So here we are. We got new Macs. So this is very appropriate to be talking to you and for you and I to be talking, because I don't think poor Federico's writing right now about Macs, which I think is very funny. So we can go very long and let him keep writing. He might even be listening. So, hey, Tichi.
Hey, buddy.
In any event, we should get into the event, I guess. I mean, this wasn't really what I expected. It kind of is, but it's both less and more than I expected, especially with the M3. I really didn't expect to get the full lineup of M3 through M3 Max. We didn't get an Ultra, of course, but I really figured this would be kind of like an entry-level event with just the M3. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's been the pattern for Apple Silicon, right? M1, and then later M1 Pro and Max, and even later the Ultra. The M2 followed the same pattern. The M2 lifespan was actually even longer. And yeah, so this is a break from tradition. Who knows what it'll be moving forward, right? Like, will the M4 be like this, or is the M3 an outlier? Time will tell. But it is really interesting. And I'm sure we will get into the what actual Macs got these chips. That's also really interesting.
Right.
But yeah, overall, the M3 line looks really good. And Apple was quick to note that this is on that new, smaller 3-nanometer process, something that, there's been a lot of hand-wringing about in the press and in the industry relief. Apple is going to be able to do this, and they've been able to do it. And I think if you look at some of their charts that don't have labels, they're clearly very proud of the performance per watt that they can achieve now with this new process.
Right. And I mean, it is impressive. I mean, of course, the devil's in the details. We have to actually try these Macs out to see how fast they feel in practice. But at least to hear Apple tell it, these are significantly faster chips. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, it's interesting to think about the Apple Silicon line and whether we actually have any kinds of patterns. I mean, I kind of feel like we don't at this point, because as you shared with me this afternoon, that M2 line, it was a full year before we got all the M2s out. And whereas the M1 was, what was it, like closer to 6 months or something like that, or 8?
Yeah. So, well, actually looking at this, I think I misspoke earlier. So the M1 was in November 2020. It was the next fall we got M1 Pro and M1 Max, and it was the March after that we got M1 Ultra. So M1 actually was longer than M2. But I think M2, taking a year, and I think what's also unusual about the M2 generation is that 15-inch MacBook Air, right? That it is a base M2, but it came out 1 year later than the first M2, the 13-inch MacBook Air.
I do wonder if that was like like they couldn't make that machine and volume until that time, because that's such a popular Mac, because I really would like a 15-inch Air myself, but I've been kind of holding out for the M3.
Yeah, I would wait at this point, I think. But yeah, it is interesting to see them break from the pattern. I think clearly Apple's capability here is ready to go, right? There were there was reporting that maybe there wasn't going to be a base M3. They would just do the Pro and Max, or they would be really limited. And so maybe it would just be in like just some models. And they did leave some computers out of this, but it seems like they're ready to go. They're all, you can order them all right now. In fact, the store is already back up, but the M3 Max is going to ship a little bit later. But it seems like the rest of it's good to go. Now, if these start, in the next couple of days, these start slipping and, they're slipping to the end of the year to get one, then maybe they do have, capacity issues. But I don't think Apple would have gone this hard if they thought, oh gosh, we don't have that many of these things laying around.
True, true. And you know, it's interesting that the order in which the various Macs have adopted each chip has changed as well, because it was the Air and then the Mac Mini that got the M1 initially, and now we're starting with the iMac, which was the third one, I think, with the M1. So kind of interesting there, but it also, I mean, as a result of skipping the M2 generation, it's the one that's gone the longest. So that makes some sense to me as well. But it's in a lot of ways that M2 iMac is very much like a MacBook Air, just not, you know, in form factor.
Yeah, and the iMac does hold the distinction of being the first Mac that was redesigned with Apple Silicon in mind. If you remember those first M1 machines, they were just Intel bodies with, you know, Apple Silicon slapped in there, and they radically transformed them. And to this day, I think the M1 MacBook Air is a fantastic laptop. But the iMac came along radically different than what we had before. That design, I wrote about this on Mac Stories years ago. That design was like 10 years old. It had been a long time. And who knows what happened to the M2 iMac? But I am glad to see it get the M3, that Apple is still committed to the all-in-one. And honestly, out of all their computers, the iMac, while it feels important and like emotionally it's important, in terms of the market, it's not that important, honestly. You know, it's not the best-selling desktop, I don't think. And certainly they sell way more laptops than desktops. So I get it. And maybe that will just be the cadence of the iMac. You know, maybe the iMac won't get the M4, for instance, but get the M5. We just, again, we're too early into this. We don't know what the patterns are really, but we'll see as we go.
Yeah, I spent a summer with the M1 iMac on my desk, and there's a lot to be said for that design. I mean, it looks fantastic, and it's so nice with so few cords, and the fact that you can hook the Ethernet up through, you know, the power cable.
Yeah.
It just works really well, especially if you have to have it, like, if you live somewhere where you have it out in the open, you know, it's something that you can have out without looking messy very easily, which is cool. Yeah. And I'm still using that M1 Air myself, and it's still going strong. I haven't had any issues with it at all, although, as I said, I would like to try the M3. One thing, Stephen, about this iMac that I want to talk to you about was one of the last things that John Ternus said, was that he said that the screen is a great replacement for the 4K and 5K iMac screens. That's essentially what he said, to paraphrase. And to me, what he was telegraphing is that the iMac Pro is done.
Who knows? I mean, it could be that it's still just not ready. And so, of course, they're going to say this, you know, that, this was totally the way to go for now. Because the truth is, it's not a replacement. There are people who do want or require a larger screen, whether it's for their work, whether it's for accessibility reasons. I don't see 24-inch 4.5K fully accommodating those users.
No, that's true.
And I'm one of those people. Like, I like the iMac. I like the all-in-one. But I wouldn't seriously consider going down to a 24.5-inch screen from a 27. And
right.
I don't think I'm alone in that. So I don't know if they're closing the door on a larger iMac. You know, maybe Apple thinks between the Studio Display and the Mac Mini and the Mac Studio, like there's enough parts there where people can have the 27-inch display and have a powerful computer. But there are people who want that in an all-in-one. So I think time will tell. I'm choosing to believe it's still possible.
All right. Well, I like your optimism. I mean, it is a great machine, and there are things about like the Mac Mini and especially the Mac Studio that a lot of people don't need. Yeah. If you don't need a lot of ports, for instance, you know, why buy one of those? But the iMac is a lot closer to an Air in that sense.
Yeah, and Kimball mentions in the chat that consumers won't notice the step down from 27 to 24. That may be true, but the iMac did a weird thing in its later years where it really spread up the chain to be a more pro computer. And I'm not even talking about the iMac Pro. Like, take that off the table. Those last few Intel Silver iMacs, you could do real serious work on them.
Yeah, they could be spec'd up pretty high.
Yeah, and people put them in professional work environments, you know, let alone the iMac Pro. And so I think there are those people who look at the 24 and think, well, it's not quite enough. It's also saddled with all of the limitations of the base level system on a chip. So the RAM ceiling and the storage ceiling are lower because there's not a Pro or a Max version. And so maybe you're okay with the screen size, but maybe you really need more than 2 terabytes of storage and more, whatever the new RAM ceiling is. And so there's also that limitation with the iMac because of what's inside of it.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. I mean, that's one of the things that I've kind of come to the conclusion. I'm in a different place with the Mac than you are right now, since you're fully portable with one Pro machine. I'm doing the Mac Studio and the M1 Air, and I'm okay with that less capable laptop because it's not my primary laptop. It's not the one that I'm doing my like audio editing on. I do that at home. I mean, I can and I do, but for the most part, my MacBook Air is just a writing machine that I take with me to a coffee shop and that sort of thing.
Yeah. My only Mac, that's not true. My only Mac in use, in service, is a M2 Pro 14-inch MacBook Pro. And I have that hooked up to a studio display that's in my setup since the M2 Pro came out. So I guess earlier this year. We'll get to the MacBook Pro. 9-month lifespan of the M2 Pro and Max.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah, I wonder how do you feel about the 14-inch MacBook Pro in particular, having just bought one? Because I've not used one before. I mean, other than playing with them at the store.
It's perfect. The 14-inch size is so good. You can get all the power you can get into a 16-inch, and it's on your desk, not that much bigger than a MacBook Air. Like it is. The 14-inch MacBook Pro is perfect. I love it so much.
Yeah. Well, but you're right. It's really interesting that this. I really didn't think we'd see the 14 and the 16 today, mainly because it hasn't been all that long since we got the M2 for those computers. But here we are.
If they had just done the M3, we wouldn't have seen it, right?
Right.
That's interesting. We do need to touch on one more thing on the iMac, though, John.
What's that?
Keyboard, trackpad, and mouse still use Lightning. They did not switch to
how
USB-C.
about that? I know. The first thing I did after the event wrapped up is I went right to the accessories page, and it hasn't changed at all.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on there. It is a little annoying that we're not in the all USB-C world. But like I use a Magic keyboard and Magic trackpad with a Logitech mouse. And same. I have a USB-C to Lightning cable just coiled up behind my studio display to charge them when they need charging. It's not the end of the world that it's not USB-C. It's a little weird that it's not, and it prolongs the death of Lightning. But, they're still selling bajillions of iPhones with Lightning. They're still selling, lots of things, AirPods Max, all the other AirPods except the new Pros. We're in the very beginning of this transition. I know we've had USB-C since 2015 on the MacBook, but we're not into this transition until the iPhone changes, because that's what really matters to Apple. And I think they'll get there. It's a little bit of a bummer, but I'm not saying we go out in a strike or something, or picket Apple Park over it.
Right. No, I mean, I was a little surprised as well. I mean, I don't really care that much because, like you, I mean, the thing about the trackpad and the keyboard is that the battery lasts forever. So it's not like I'm connecting them the power very often. My keyboard is getting a little. I've actually worn most of the A key off of my keyboard.
Yeah, mine's the S key. The S key is gone. Like,
I don't know why that is. It's just the A key, but I'm.
Yeah, what are you doing with the A key all the time?
I don't know. My pinky is doing something strange with that A key. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe I'm just typing a lot of A's.
Mine's the S key's worn out, and the left command key's basically gone. And I think it's because I save stuff like in Logic or Mars Edit or whatever, all the time. And, they just get worn down.
I guess. I don't know what I'm doing with the A key. It's just the way it is, but it's only weird on this keyboard. So who knows? Well, that is too bad, but we'll get there eventually. And we still have our AirPods Max to plug in with Lightning anyway. And as you said, a handful of other things. I thought it was a real flex when they showed the guy working on his MacBook Pro using an AirPods Max, I know.
I know. The article I'm writing that I'll publish after we finish, I have a section at the bottom called What's Next? And the last sentence is, and the headphones this person is wearing are getting pretty long in the tooth, but I suppose that's an announcement for another day. And it's that press photo of the person editing overlooking the water or something. Like, I don't know what's happening in this picture. He's on a ferry, I guess. Do people edit their videos on ferries? I don't live where there are ferries. I don't understand.
He was probably going over to across the bay in San Francisco. He lived over in Tiburon or something, and was going to a fancy house in Tiburon, and was typing while he was going past Alcatraz or something.
How much are AirPods Max? They are $549.
Yeah.
Sweet Moses. No one buy these.
That's a lot, especially now. I mean, it was a lot when they went on sale. I wouldn't buy them now for sure. And some people have had a lot of reliability problems with them too. I know my son, he took his in for repair like 3 times, and eventually they were out of warranty and didn't work anymore. So, but this episode of App Stories is brought to you by Notion. There are a bunch of AI tools out there, and they're all fun to play around with. But when it comes to something that you can actually plug into your workflow and use regularly, Notion AI is the one that will really help you save time in your day-to-day work. There are a ton of different things that you can use Notion for and Notion AI for. One of the things that I think is pretty cool about Notion AI is you can throw a bunch of text at it. Say you've been in a meeting and you've been taking a ton of notes. You can pull the actionable items right out of those notes. Or maybe you've been doing some research and you want a way to kind of pull everything together and create an outline from all the notes that you've taken that's more structured than the hodgepodge of notes that you created. Notion's great for that too. Of course, you can do all kinds of other things too, like track projects. I use it for show notes for our podcasts. There's a bunch of different things you can do. You can leverage the power of AI right inside of Notion across all of your notes and documents without the need to jump between your work and a separate AI-powered tool. Notion AI is designed to help you with your work right in the place where you're doing that work. Notion AI helps you automate the tedious tasks like summarizing meeting notes and finding next steps. That frees you from the busy work to do the deep work that you want to do. Whatever work you're doing, Notion AI lets you skip to the good part. You can save time and write faster by letting Notion handle brainstorming and first drafts and turn your messy notes into something much more polished. Just tell Notion AI what to do. The more details, the better. Or start from a prompt and go from there. Have it write a blog post, make an outline, brainstorm ideas, or summarize a whole bunch of documents. You can use Notion AI to improve your writing, summarize pages, find action items, translate into any language, and a whole lot more. Simply select some text, click on Ask AI, and increase your productivity like never before. Try Notion AI for free when you go to notion.com/appstories. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/appstories to try out the incredible power of Notion AI today. And when you use our link, you're supporting our show. Try Notion AI for free right now at notion.com/appstories. Our thanks to Notion for their support of the show. All right, so that's the iMac. We got the iMac down. We got to talk more about the MacBook Pro, though, because one of the things that I think surprised us right out of the gate as we were watching the event was that they started with a 14-inch MacBook Pro and announced that it was starting with an M3 chip. And we were both wondering, what's up with that?
Yeah.
And it wasn't revealed for a while that the 13-inch MacBook Pro is no longer. It's gone. It's not no longer a product in the lineup.
Yeah, well, I don't think they actually said it, but if you go on the website...
No, they didn't.
So this is super interesting. So that M2 Touch Bar MacBook Pro, the old design, right? So no SD card slot, no MagSafe, has the Touch Bar. Ooh, that machine was $1299 as its starting price, the same as the 15-inch Air. This M3 14-inch MacBook Pro starts at $1599. But for that, what you get is a machine with much better cooling and battery life. You get MagSafe, you get the SD card slot, you get a much, much better screen. It's probably the best $300 you could spend in the lineup. Now, what this raises, I think, so the general kind of consensus is the Touch Bar machine stuck around because companies and honestly, a lot of people want to buy a MacBook Pro, quote unquote, but don't want to spend $2,000, right? And so they get the cheaper one. And is that going to hold up when the thing is $300 more, or are they going to look at the MacBook Air that is not as nice, but has actually a larger screen than the 14-inch MacBook Pro and quite a bit cheaper? And the Apple Care's cheaper if you care about that. So I'm very curious to see how this is going to go. Is this going to tip in favor of slightly more expensive MacBook Pros, or is this the 15-inch Air's time to shine?
Yeah, it's interesting to me because, I mean, the Pro obviously has a better screen. I mean, it's not as big, but it is a better screen than what you get on an Air. But it's not a bad screen by any stretch of the imagination either. So
yeah. It's no ProMotion. It's no 600 nits or whatever the brightness is.
Right.
It's great. And again, if you're buying these for like people working in an office, like the Air's great. And you should have been buying the MacBook Air all along. I just wonder, like, if we sit here in a year, which is more successful, that cheap 14-inch or the 15-inch Air?
Right. You know, I want to mention Johnny Cerrugi too, because Johnny Cerrugi, to me, I love his segments when they go down into his lab because he is just so intense. He's all juiced up and ready to go. Yeah,
his creepy lab tonight.
Yeah, he was ready to go. I mean, he's got his intense wild eyes going, and he just wants to tell you about all of his specs about his chips, which is great. I mean, they have a lot to brag about these chips, I think.
Yeah, no doubt.
What's interesting to me too is kind of how Apple pitches these machines as well, because, you know, we used to kind of make fun of the fact that every iPad, especially the iPad mini, promo video had a pilot with an iPad in his pocket. You know, it was that, or it was like the archaeologist who was down in a hole recording something on an iPad Pro. And we've really gotten to the point where now we've got all sorts of physicists and things like that who are using these MacBook Pros. And I think we saw doctors and physicists and astrophysicists, and it was probably, you know, whereas I think on the consumer side of things with things like the MacBook Air, there's a greater emphasis on students, on creative types, you know, people composing music and things like that. There was definitely some of that here, but it was more along the lines of you can compose your film score, or you could have hundreds of tracks in your Logic file, as opposed to you can use, you know, GarageBand or iMovie and make, you know, a project for school, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I do wonder, I mean, again, that's like where that low-end MacBook Pro kind of fits, right? It kind of fits on both sides of that.
Yep.
It's just interesting. And I mean, overall, like the vibe of this event was pros, notebooks, dark mode, all that stuff. And the iMac, I mean, you even said in iMessage, you're like, oh, we're not getting an iMac. And then they did. But it was basically in voiceover and very short, right? This was a MacBook Pro event the iMac got to hitch a ride to. And, you know, that pairing's a little unusual. Apple's had weirder pairings in events over the years, but that one definitely was a little bit unusual. But again, I think the overall story here, like if we zoom way out from the details, it's Apple Silicon is doing just fine. That despite reporting or vibes that people think, oh, Apple came out strong, but they're fading or they're having struggles moving forward, or Qualcomm and others are going to catch them. Apple's saying, not only can we continue to move the ball forward and all this stuff, we're going to do 3 at once. We're going to do it more aggressively than we have been doing it. And I find that really interesting because as good as these machines seem, the overall strategy is super important to consider because we are only a couple of years into this. We don't know how it's going to shape up over time, right? We kind of thought we did, and then Apple turned it on its head tonight with having 3 chips at once. So that's really what I was looking at this event for. Is like, what are they saying about Apple Silicon? What machines are they putting it into? And where is Apple pushing things forward? So here we had AV1. We had really, it seems like the GPU is the story on the M3 line with hardware-enabled ray tracing and the mesh. What do they? I'm not a gamer. What do they call it? So okay, here it is. So dynamic caching is an industry-first method of allocating memory in real time to improve performance. Hardware-accelerated ray tracing and hardware-accelerated mesh shading come to the Mac for the first time.
Yeah, a couple of things about that to me. I mean, one is I do agree that the M1 iMac or the M3 iMac did seem a little out of place, except for the fact that they needed, I think, more of a story than just the 14-inch low-end model MacBook Pro to be on the M3, because there was a lot deeper story to tell about the Pro and the Max with the 14 and 16. So there's that. I do think it's odd that we didn't see anything about gaming during this event. I mean, we saw some brief gameplay from, I think it was Resident Evil Village and maybe a couple of other games during, a montage sequence. And when they were talking about things like the shaders and so forth, but we didn't have anybody on stage. And I thought, given that Capcom released Resident Evil Village today on the iPhone for the first time, that we would at least hear about that. And that maybe we would hear about Death Stranding and or Resident Evil 4, which is being remade for Apple platforms too, because, there was one school of thought that the reason we were doing this event in the evening was because it's daytime, it's Tuesday morning in Japan. And that they wanted, right? And they wanted to have somebody from Japan on the video, maybe live or something. I guess in retrospect, given that it's all recorded, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense necessarily. But but maybe they wanted to have it where it was more watchable in Japan,
maybe
instead of the way it is. But obviously not.
It was amazing this time around what people were trying to like shoehorn into the reason.
Yes.
And I mean, I've told y'all, I may have said it on Connected, I'll say it here. I think Apple PR is a little bored at times. And I think they saw, hey, we're going to be at the end of October. We can do it the night before Halloween. We can make everyone dress black. We can have Tim Cook wear that sick orange watch band. And we can just theme this event. And why not? Like, I mean, yeah, the timing is bad for some people, but you know what? It's awesome for some people. In the Relay Discord, we had a bunch of Australians and they're talking during the live event. That never happens because they're always asleep when the events go on. I was trying to put out there, like, I think they're just doing this because it's fun, and that's totally fine because most people don't pay attention to these things, right? We do, our listeners do, right? It's our whole ecosystem. But like people who are buying a new MacBook Pro are just going to buy a new one when it's time they need a laptop, and that's all. It doesn't really matter what time of day it was announced. So I think they just did it for the fun of it, and you know what? I was here for it. Yeah, it's kind of late. We're talking at 8:15 my time, but it was fun, and all the spooky music, and they had the cool old Apple pirate flag. Like, I'm here for all that stuff.
Yeah, well, and they really did have a real message to deliver, which is, as you said, really showing that the M3 chip is here, and it's all here all at once. And there are enough products to make a case for an event, even if it was only a half an hour event. So I think it's an experiment too. I mean, this is a primetime event. Opposite sports. It'll be interesting to see, if I were Apple, I'd be looking to see what my streaming numbers on YouTube and elsewhere were like after this sort of thing. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, I think so. Anything else on the MacBook Pros? Did we talk about the space black finish?
We did not. That looks cool. It looks really good. I mean, I don't know what to say about it other than space black. It's back and it's amazing. It looks fantastic. I mean, that alone makes me want one. And I think it is a really hard choice between that 15-inch MacBook Air and the 14-inch MacBook Pro for a lot of people. I think it's going to be, because if you're like me, I'm drawn to the MacBook Pro's screen, the quality of it, especially the brightness if I'm sitting outside or something. But I also want a big screen. And so that draws me to the MacBook Air. And especially since I don't need a laptop that's my most powerful computer, I'm happy with the Air. So I really don't know what decision I would make if I were choosing between an M3 15-inch Air and an M3 MacBook Pro right now.
Yeah. Well, if you want space black, you got to do the Pro or the Max, not the base.
No, that's true. That's true.
And
you gotta go big.
And the space black replaces space gray on those two machines, so it's just silver, which is what mine is in. It's like silver is the classic color, and I think with the black keyboard well on the Pros, it looks really awesome.
Yeah, it does.
In his article, Jason Snell wrote, he had hands-on with this stuff earlier today, and he said that it's appreciably darker than the space gray, but it's still a shimmery metallic gray. Fans of Darth Vader stand down. So maybe not as cool as the black MacBook was, but I still think it looks pretty cool. And if I were in the market, I think I'd go for it just because it is new and looks pretty cool.
Yeah, that looks very different. I mean, it'll stand out, I think, when you see it out in public for sure. Yeah,
I think so too.
I think it looks fantastic. I was wearing my orange Apple Watch Ultra Band today too, just like Tim. So, I was dressed for the occasion. I don't know about you.
I mean, I'm in a flannel shirt and black jeans. It's kind of my go-to.
All right.
Yeah, I am going to walk around, doing spooky voices and spooky music now.
All right. Very good. Very good. Well, is there anything else we should talk about? I don't know if there's a lot more to it than that, really.
Yeah. I mean, this is a story of evolution on the Apple Silicon side, right? These MacBook Pros in particular, they are faster. I found it interesting. Apple compared them to the M1 a lot. Maybe they're trying to get those people to upgrade. Of course, they smoked the Intel machines. Apple also just called out Intel by name several times, which is fun.
Yes.
They used to be like, oh, and the old systems, so no, we're just calling it by name.
I mean, it's nice that they're that much faster than the Intel iMacs and MacBook Pros, but those are pretty old machines now, so it's not surprising. It's not surprising that there's a large factor there in terms of performance.
Yeah, if you're on an M2 something, I don't think there's any need to run out an upgrade, unless I think the one caveat to that is if hardware support for AV1 would change your life at work, then maybe yes. But I think other than that, if you're in the Apple Silicon world already, I don't think there's anything here that is really going to kind of get people to upgrade that weren't going to upgrade already, right? Some people do this every couple of years just automatically, but I don't think there's anything here that really changes that equation. And again, I think that's totally fine. We are now into this a couple of years. It's an evolution. These machines do seem much more powerful than what we've had in the past. But, M2 to M3, it's only a couple of years, less than a year for the MacBook Pro. And so this was never going to be one of those deals this is 4 times faster, right? Those things just don't happen very often. And I don't find that disappointing. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with this. I'm glad the iMac got some attention. I'm super glad that 13-inch Touch Bar machine is gone. The Mac notebook line makes way more sense than it has in years. Maybe since 2015, maybe 8 or 9 years, this makes the most sense. And so cleaning all that up, cleaning house in all those areas while moving the ball forward in Apple Silicon, that's a win. And I think that Apple's clearly serious about all this and showed us once again that they can make this stuff happen.
Yep, definitely. And I'm happy to be in a place where I don't feel like I need to upgrade my Macs because they have a bad keyboard or something like that. The fact that I've got an M1 Mac Studio, it's going to last me years. So I don't worry about that at all. I'll switch laptops more often than I do the desktop, But yeah, and I think, battery life, there's a little bit of a battery life story here too. That seems to improve. The efficiency here is better. That's worthwhile, I suppose, for some people if you're on battery a lot. But yeah, you're right. It is very much an incremental year this year.
Yeah. And it's totally cool because where we were was already really good. It's those times. I mean, you said it, you brought the perfect example. That 2016 to 2020 MacBook Pro with the keyboard and all that mess, it was brutal. Yeah. I mean, it was so bad. And, a lot of people held on to machines from 2013, 14, 15 and skipped all of those. I think that was pretty wise.
Yeah.
And really the Touch Bar machine going away closes that chapter. The keyboards have been gone for a while, but clearly the Touch Bar wasn't the right idea. And I think Apple knew it basically immediately. And they never really did much with it past the initial support, that they had in the OS and in their first party apps. Some third parties did some interesting things, but it was never the right idea. And Apple sort of closed that chapter tonight by getting rid of that machine. And that's also a really good thing because the lineup makes more sense. We can kind of just think that Touch Bar was like a collective fever dream, and we can all move forward.
Yeah, my 2016 MacBook Pro is probably the worst decision I've ever made in terms of buying a laptop or any computer for that matter.
Yeah.
It was rough. It ran hot. I never had the terrible keyboard problems. They did get stuck, but I didn't have terrible keyboard issues, but they were noisy and hot, and the battery life wasn't great and all sorts of things. All right, Stephen, I think we probably got to wrap it up right there and get off to do some writing. Thank you very much for staying up past your normal working time to talk to me today. I want to thank our sponsor, Notion, for this episode. And, you can find Stephen over at relay.fm, right, Stephen? Where else are you found these days on the internet?
Yeah, so I co-host Connected and Mac Power Users on Relay, and I write at 512pixels.net. And you can find me on Mastodon as ISMH at eworld.social.
Very nice. And you're on Instagram. You're ISMH86. We got to remind everybody of your 86. I was looking at that the other day.
I have a real branding problem. I think the number has to come with me everywhere. Too. I think that's what's going to happen.
All right. Well, you can find me at macstories.net, and I'm John Voorhees on both Mastodon and on Instagram. JOHNVOORHWES. Talk to you later, Stephen.
Bye, y'all.